I still remember what I wore to the Strive Corp interview: navy blazer, pressed slacks, and shoes I spent 2 hours polishing the night before. I'd printed 5 copies of my resume on thick, ivory paper and rehearsed my talking points so many times, I could have delivered them in my sleep. I was 25, freshly graduated with a degree in business communications, top 10% of my class. During school, I ran a small e-commerce side hustle that made just enough to pay half my tuition. I'd interned at a pair of startups, cold-called over 500 leads during a summer internship, and even created a mock CRM system as a final project that my professor said was surprisingly viable. I thought I was more than ready. I thought this was my moment. Strive Corp was a big name in B2B sales. High energy. High stakes. Big rewards. Everyone wanted in, and I believed I had the grit and the brain to be one of them. I even pictured myself in their office building, working late, coffee in hand, celebrating big wins with a team that respected me. When I walked into that glass conference room, my heart was pounding. 4 people sat across the table, all with identical laptops open and polite but unreadable expressions. They introduced themselves quickly: Mark, Anna, Kyle, and Veronica. Veronica didn't smile. She looked like she'd seen 1,000 versions of me and didn't expect much from the 1,001st. The questions began, some standard, some probing. How do you handle rejection on a cold call? Tell me about a time you exceeded sales targets. What motivates you when results are slow? What's your philosophy on client retention? I gave what I thought were thoughtful, strategic answers. I referenced metrics, customer psychology, real-world examples from my internships. I could feel Mark nodding along. Kyle even scribbled something enthusiastically. Anna smiled once or twice. Veronica? Still stone-faced. Then she asked the question that threw me off. What makes you think you can sell better than someone with 10 years in the game? It wasn't the question itself, it was the tone. Dismissive. I blinked, kept my composure, and gave her a confident reply. I may not have 10 years, but I've spent the last 4 building a foundation most people rush through. I know I'll have to prove myself, but I'm used to being underestimated, and I'm used to winning anyway. I thought that was a solid answer. Punchy. Honest. Ambitious. But Veronica just stared at me for a beat, then glanced down at her screen. The interview ended 20 minutes later. They shook my hand. Anna wished me luck. Kyle told me I had great energy. But Veronica leaned back and said, with a smooth, practiced smile, "You're clearly passionate, and I respect that. But to be honest, you don't quite have that natural edge we look for in sales. Sales takes more than preparation. It takes instinct, and a certain quality. You either have it or you don't. And I just don't see it in you yet." It stung like hell. I smiled politely, thanked them for their time, and walked out with my head held high, but my stomach twisted into knots. The rejection email came 2 days later. A boilerplate message. Thank you for your interest in Strive Corp. At this time, we have chosen to move forward with other candidates whose experience more closely aligns with our current needs. Generic. Cold. Final. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my friends. I just stared at the screen for 10 minutes, hearing Veronica's voice in my head. You just don't have that thing. What she didn't know was, that sentence would become the fuel for everything I did next. Rejection doesn't break you if you know how to use it. It burns, sure. But if you channel that fire, it forges something stronger. That's exactly what I did. After Strive Corp passed on me, I spent one day sulking. No more. The very next morning, I pulled out a notebook and wrote 4 words across the top of a clean page. Build. Prove. Grow. Dominate. That became my mantra. I wasn't just going to get better. I was going to become so undeniably good that someone like Veronica would have no choice but to sit down, shut up, and learn from me. I applied to over 30 companies that week. Most wanted experience I didn't have. Some didn't respond. But one company, Brightbox Solutions, a scrappy cybersecurity firm with less than 50 employees, gave me a shot. Their offer was modest, $36,000 base, plus small commissions. No signing bonus. No perks. The office had flickering lights in the bathroom and coffee that tasted like cardboard. But they had something far more important than free snacks or ping-pong tables: opportunity. I started as a junior sales associate, cold calling small businesses to pitch our endpoint protection software. The leads were ice cold. My script was outdated. The CRM barely worked. Most days, I got hung up on a dozen times before noon. But I stayed late. Listened to my own calls every night. I kept a spreadsheet of objections and built rebuttals for each one. I studied top sales books, subscribed to podcasts, watched live demos from top reps online. I even joined a local Toastmasters group to refine my voice and confidence in presentation. By month 4, I wasn't just meeting quota, I was quietly blowing it out of the water. By month 6, I was the top performer on my team of 12. Our sales manager, Raj, pulled me into his office one afternoon. I remember the way he looked at my numbers and then at me like I was some kind of anomaly. "How the hell are you doing this with the same leads everyone else has?" I told him the truth. I stopped waiting for good leads and made the bad ones work. He laughed. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I think we need to rethink how we train people. And I want you to help me do it." That was the start of my real journey. Raj let me develop a side project, the Sales Playbook, a systemized onboarding process with detailed objection handling, conversation mapping, and emotional targeting strategies. I built a shadowing program, started hosting morning prep huddles, and led live call breakdown sessions. In just 4 months, our team's average close rate went from 11% to 18%. 2 quarters later, Brightbox Solutions closed their biggest year in sales. I wasn't just closing deals anymore, I was building a system that trained others to do the same. And people noticed. LinkedIn recruiters started reaching out. Companies I had once applied to and been ghosted by were now liking my posts and sharing my insights. For the first time, I started to feel the tide turning. But the moment everything changed, the moment that made all those late nights worth it, was at the 2023 National Sales Growth Conference. Brightbox had earned a booth. Raj nominated me to speak on a breakout panel. Turning struggles into systems, a junior rep's road to results. I gave a talk to a room of about 60. I told them my story, the rejection, the grind, the rebuild. I walked through my playbook, broke down the data, and showed proof. I got laughs. I got nods. I got questions afterward that spilled into the hallway. And then I saw her. Veronica. Standing at the back. She didn't come up to me right away, just gave me a look. Not of pity this time. Not even skepticism. It was curiosity. And maybe, just maybe, a flicker of respect. After the talk at the conference, I lingered in the hallway, still buzzing from the adrenaline. A few people came up, handed me business cards, asked about the sales templates I'd mentioned. One woman said, "You made cold calling sound almost fun." I laughed and thanked her. But all the while, my eyes kept drifting back to the tall woman in the navy pantsuit, arms folded, still watching from a distance. Veronica. Eventually, she walked over. Calm. Controlled. Her expression unreadable as always. She extended her hand, and I shook it, trying to stay grounded despite the wave of vindication surging through me. "Impressive talk," she said. "You've done well for yourself." It wasn't exactly an apology, but in her world, it might as well have been a standing ovation. "Thank you," I replied, cool and composed on the outside, but burning with satisfaction inside. She glanced down at the name tag around my neck. "You're with Brightbox now?" I nodded. "We're lucky to have him," Raj chimed in from beside me, having overheard. "Built our internal sales training from the ground up. Cut onboarding time in half." Veronica looked me over one more time, then asked, "Would you ever consider consulting? We're looking to restructure our sales development program. Could use someone with a fresh perspective." That moment hit like a thunderclap. The woman who once told me I didn't have that thing was now asking for my help. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I wasn't interested, but because I'd waited so long to hear those words, I needed to let them land. "Sure," I said finally, offering the same professional smile she'd once given me. "Send over the details. I'll take a look." 3 weeks later. I walked into StriveCorp's downtown office building, the very same glass fortress where I'd been rejected 3 years earlier. Everything looked the same. Polished floors, sharp suits, receptionists with perfectly neutral smiles. But this time, I wasn't there for an interview. I was there to lead a session. They put me in a sleek conference room with a whiteboard wall, a massive TV, and 12 young sales reps seated in a semicircle. Some were fresh out of college, others had a year or two under their belts. None of them knew my history with the company. They didn't need to. But Veronica knew. And she was sitting in the back again, this time with a notepad. I started my presentation. No slides. Just me, a marker, and a story. I talked about real sales psychology, not the fake, aggressive garbage they teach in outdated books, but the kind rooted in curiosity, in service, in human behavior. I showed them how to ask better questions, how to listen without interrupting, and how to build genuine urgency without manipulation. Sales isn't about pressure, I told them. It's about alignment. It's not closing, it's connecting. You're not tricking people into saying yes. You're guiding the right people to a decision they already want to make. Eyes widened. Pens scribbled. By the end of the first hour, half the team looked visibly different, sitting straighter, more alert. The second hour was hands-on, live objection handling drills, real-time roleplay, call dissection. I pushed them hard, not to intimidate, but to elevate. And they responded. After the session, one rep, Marcus, pulled me aside. Honestly, that was the first time I felt like someone actually explained why we do what we do, not just what to say. Thanks for that. That moment meant more to me than any trophy. As I packed up, Veronica approached again. This time, no clipboard. No distance. Just a nod and a quiet. "We'd like to book you for 3 more sessions. Maybe more." I shook her hand. "Let me check my calendar." I walked out of that building not as someone begging for a chance, but as someone who created his own value and came back on his own terms. And it felt damn good. Consulting for StriveCorp was supposed to be a side gig, a handful of workshops, a few emails, a little polish on their existing onboarding structure. But what started as a few sessions quickly snowballed into something far bigger. After my initial training, Veronica invited me to sit in on a weekly pipeline meeting with their mid-tier managers. I agreed. Partly for the experience, partly because I was curious. But mostly because I wanted to see the culture from the inside. It was revealing. The room was full of smart people, but the energy was fractured. People were too polite, too rehearsed. They weren't collaborating, they were reporting. Each manager rattled off numbers and shifted blame when quotas weren't met. I could see the issue immediately. They weren't underperforming because they lacked skill. They were underperforming because no one trusted each other, or the system. After the meeting, Veronica asked me for my thoughts. I gave her the unvarnished truth. You have talented people with no shared playbook, no unified language, and no psychological safety. Your reps don't need more tools, they need leadership that listens, adapts, and teaches from the front. There was a pause. I half expected her to bristle. But to my surprise, she leaned back and said, "All right. What would you do if this was your team?" So I told her. The blueprint. Over the next 3 weeks, I built a full framework for Strive Corp's sales development system. Unified onboarding flow. A structured 30-day ramp-up with checkpoint assessments, buddy pairing, and live coaching. Sales language standardization. Everyone used the same terms: discovery, alignment, leverage, objection stage. No more jargon soup. Objection handling lab. A rotating weekly drill where teams faced real-time pushback and had to pivot with agility. Manager as coach model. I train team leads not just to monitor KPIs but to mentor humans. One-on-ones became feedback loops, not performance interrogations. Win story library. Top reps recorded short breakdowns of how they won complex deals. This created a living archive of tactical brilliance. I packaged the system into a modular curriculum, complete with video walkthroughs, coaching guides, and live Q&A scripts. I even created mock sales calls with bad and good examples. And yes, in one of the bad examples, I included a fictional manager saying something like, "You just don't have that instinct, you either have it or you don't." No one caught the reference. Except Veronica. She didn't say anything. Just smirked when she heard it. The change begins. By month 2, the shift was undeniable. Reps were closing faster. Onboarding time was cut by a third. New hires were ramping in 4 to 6 weeks instead of 10. Even internal surveys showed morale climbing, and that was something data couldn't fake. One afternoon, Veronica and I were walking down the hallway after a strategy meeting. She stopped at the break room window, watching a few reps laugh over coffee. For the first time, she looked relaxed. "They're more confident," she said. "Because now they know what they're aiming for," I replied. "And someone's actually helping them hit it." There was a long pause. "We should have hired you 3 years ago," she said quietly. I turned to her. Not with resentment, but with calm certainty. "You didn't need to." "I wasn't ready yet." She raised an eyebrow. "You're ready now." I nodded. "That's why I came back." By the end of the quarter, Strive Corp offered me a retainer contract. Not as a trainer. Not even as a consultant. As a strategic advisor to sales leadership. Veronica and I now meet monthly, as equals. She no longer talks at me. She listens. And when she does speak, it's with the awareness that the kid she once wrote off is now shaping the way her company grows. 6 months into my contract with Strive Corp, I was invited to speak at their annual Leadership Summit, the company's biggest internal event, attended by every manager, executive, and stakeholder across all regions. The theme that year was Redefining Excellence. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stood backstage, holding a clicker in one hand and a glass of water in the other, dressed in a tailored suit I bought just for the occasion. I glanced down at my notes one last time, then looked up at the title of my talk projected on the screen. From Rejection to Reinvention, What Sales Teams Really Need to Thrive. When the host called my name, the applause was polite. Reserved. But by the end of my keynote, the tone had shifted. I spoke with fire but never bitterness. I told them about the version of me who walked into Strive Corp years ago with big dreams and an eager mind, and how that version wasn't given a chance, not because he lacked potential, but because no one knew how to cultivate it. I didn't name names. I didn't call out Veronica. I didn't need to. Instead, I shared what I'd learned. That talent isn't born, it's built. That people don't succeed alone, they rise when someone takes the time to teach them how. That writing someone off too early says more about your vision than their capability. I closed with one simple line. Great companies don't just look for that thing in people. They create environments where it develops. When I stepped down, the applause was real. Long earned. The quiet victory. After the summit, I was approached by 3 managers from different departments, all of whom had rejected me at one point in the past. They asked for help building mentorship programs, designing onboarding, and even reworking how they gave performance feedback. Every time, I said yes. Not out of pettiness. But because I knew something they were only now beginning to learn. Helping someone grow will always leave a bigger legacy than proving someone wrong. Still, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't satisfying when, a few weeks later, I walked into a StriveCorp meeting room and saw a printed copy of my Objection Mastery Grid taped to the whiteboard. Or when I overheard a rep quoting my line from a training session. Don't chase the close. Build the bridge. Or when Veronica forwarded me a company-wide email, adding just 4 words at the top. We should have hired you. Where I am now. Today, I run my own consultancy, a sales enablement firm that works with growing companies across tech, health, finance, and education. I help them train their people, fix their processes, and create cultures where no one gets dismissed for not having it. I don't chase validation anymore. I create value, and the results speak louder than the rejection ever did. But sometimes, when I walk past a glass conference room full of new hires in suits too stiff, holding notepads too clean, I see myself. And I think about that kid. The one who was told he didn't have what it takes. The one who came back not to prove them wrong, but to teach them how right he could be.